So in this module, we're going to introduce ourselves to generative design. And the next graphic probably is kind of descriptive of where we're talking in the realm of architectural generative design. So here we have a building floor plate tower then, sculpted possibly to meet building codes, and then having all kinds of evaluations automatically run. When I say automatically, we run it through a series of variable parameters and have then various outputs that we can then establish the qualities, the optimum qualities that we want of our building, which might be in this case the best sight lines, the best amount of revenue per square foot, and so on. And behind all of this was the ability of BIM to parametricize our models, to add values that could be shifted to change our actual physical forms of our models. So here we have a parametric form shape that could have been created in Dynamo or Grasshopper. And the idea of these sliders moving is now really the activity of what would be the computer. You ask it to go through these values and do these evaluations for you, and then capture them, and then probably reiterate around optimized values. So this idea of generative design is really an automation concept in many ways. And when it's applied to other kinds of architectural projects like site layout, it can be extremely effective and useful. So here we have, once again, just like that building footprint, the idea of value system, solar gain, the program, the profit, the cost, the amount of outdoor space that people have, the kind of views that might be established, and then sliders changing inputs to create different types of scenarios and layouts. And these are getting quite sophisticated. And they can also do, I guess, relatively simple things like place entourage components in a site in a random behavior, so that you can then evaluate maybe optimized natural kinds of behaviors of layouts of trees and or landscape elements. One of the big ones that Autodesk promotes is the idea of optimizing office layouts. In this case, these are assigned desk spaces and then maybe gathering spaces and then modules between different departments. And the idea is to put that all with these kind of value systems, daylight, work style preferences, adjacencies, things that are close to each other, and so on. And then carried forward, the idea is generating that, and this is just kind of a wow graphic, but generating lots of mutations or permutations of a design concept in order to figure out which one performs the best with those characteristics. And all of that can seem very automated and maybe not humanistic in its view, but the idea of developing this model, this concept of what the value systems are, is really where a lot of the creative input comes in. How do you figure out what a good view is? How do you figure out what positive adjacency is? And then how do you assign mathematical value systems to it? So that concept is much of the work of the designer. They use this graphic here as the computational tool and then the output of an optimized design, so to speak. And typically in generative design talk, you generate ideas, you analyze ideas for optimizing them, you then rank them to figure out which one is better than the other or according to the constraint systems. And then the more advanced ideas, obviously you could actually almost stop right at ranking, but there are higher level concepts of evolving the design, picking something that's slightly better than the next one, and then starting to refine on that one to figure out whether you could, and even a cluster of ones that show positive value, whether you can then change some various characteristics of those and evolve them to a better performing system and or arrangement or design. And then the idea also is to explore, to freeform think, to use kind of the brute force, kicking out a whole bunch of ideas to see which ones present the most promising or interesting types of ideas. And then finally, this whole task is only of use if it's integrated back into the original design and is useful and helpful to it. So in our lab, we're going to look specifically at a really simple introductory case where we have a building site surrounded by buildings that could, in fact, block the view, so to speak, of the building that we're going to build. And the process here will then be to, by varying floor height and location within this boundary red area, um, pick what allows us to have the best views. And this project's been greatly simplified because we're only going to concern ourselves with views. We're not going to add any other parameters, mostly so we can play around with it and get a good handle on a first introduction to generative design. So that'll lead into the specific project.